This lecture is going to be a much shorter lecture. I just want to give you the information and kind of an overview of a business analyst glossary that I've created that I want to have out there for you to download and utilize as you're working in the business analyst field or getting a role as a business analyst. One of the toughest parts about being a business analyst is all of the different terms that are used as part of business and as part of technology. And so this glossary is here to try to help alleviate some of that stress and anxiety with not understanding what people are talking about. So let me give you a little bit of information about this glossary. So it is available in Microsoft Excel. You can download it in a PDF, but then it's not searchable, so it's not as nice. This is Excel, and I've created a little search menu here that's a macro to be able to help you more easily search for the terms. So before I show you the search, let me just go ahead and explain this to you. It's pretty simple, but first column's the term. That's the actual term or acronym that you're looking up. And so you're able to look that up. The next column obviously is the definition, and that's a definition that for the specific term or more details about that acronym and what it means. So now that you have an understanding of kind of the overall layout, what I want to do is show you this search bar, which is really the key thing that I created for this to make a lot easier to utilize. So when you click in there, it tells you to go ahead and search in your term. One thing is it creates wildcards on both sides of the term. So if you type in just the letter C, and then you click search, it's going to pull up everything with the letter C in the term. So it does a wildcard around it. You don't have to do wildcards, anything like that. That's not going to be as easy or as nice, but what you can do is let's say you want to look up more information on brainstorming, and which is a elicitation technique utilized to obviously elicit requirements from stakeholders. So you type in your search term, and you click search, and there you go. It does an automatic filter to pull up brainstorming. So there you have it. There's brainstorming. You can type in another thing. Maybe you want to look up, analyst. And so you type that in, you go ahead and click search, and it'll pull up all the terms that have the word analyst in them. So you have analyst and then business analyst. So this glossary is something that can be utilized by you. I think it'll be extremely helpful, especially if you're new to the business analyst role in understanding all those different pieces. Thank you very much, and enjoy the glossary.